How's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 210, and I FaceTimed with Chauncey Bowers, and Chauncey is an extraordinarily fascinating human being. He's a retired research scientist. He's a troubadour, a brilliant singer-songwriter. He reminds me of if Hunter S. Thompson and Leonard Cohen, like a less high, not that Chauncey was high, but just there was something about him that reminded me of Hunter S. In the way his thought processes and his philosophy, the way he thinks about the world. If that combination with Leonard Cohen, combination with a little bit my dad, to be honest, just because my dad and I have these really cool conversations that go all over the place about everything from philosophy to science to music and art, and it reminded me of that a bit too. So anyway, very cool dude, and was very happy to be able to have this conversation with him. We cover all sorts of topics, a lot of science-y things, and philosophy for sure. We talk about his music a bit. I definitely recommend checking out the links page on this one on heyhumanpodcast.com, because I'm gonna put stuff of him performing on there. In other news, Hey Human Podcast will be found on social media, Instagram and Facebook. My personal social media is under Susan Ruthism. You can find me at susanruth.com. You can find everything Hey Human at heyhumanpodcast.com. You can email me, Susan at heyhumanpodcast.com, and I encourage you to do so. And if you have an interesting story or you know someone with an interesting story, please definitely let me know. I'm always looking for people to talk to. I've got a lot of very cool episodes coming up. What else am I going to be doing except for talking to people? So I've been stockpiling a lot of fun conversations with various kinds of people. Really enjoying it. I don't know about y'all, but I'm having definitely ebb and flow days. The last 2 days, I was not motivated in the least. I could not get myself to do anything really, other than I did watch a whole bunch of Netflix, which I haven't done in a while. It was fun to do that. I watched the new stand-up by Jerry Seinfeld. Really enjoyed it. And I'm really getting into, on Netflix, I don't know if y'all know who Duncan Trussell is. He has a podcast called the Duncan Trussell Family Hour. And he has taken interviews and actually, I don't even want to try to describe what it is. It's this wild ride in a cartoon landscape with these deep, wonderful conversations the characters are having, and I love it. It's called The Midnight Gospel. It's so good. I love it. It may not be for everyone. It probably isn't for a lot of people, but man, I really dug it a lot. The cartoons are fun. I find myself watching this show. You'll know if you watch it, you'll see what I'm saying. I find myself watching this show and getting caught up in the cartoon of it, and then maybe missing some of the things that they're talking about, and then I have to go back because I'm trying to follow along the story of the cartoon, which is incongruent to what they're talking about. And so I have to kind of separate my brain to be able to catch everything. So I go back and then listen to the conversation, and man, I tell you, it's really enjoyable. I think I'm 4 episodes in, and I love it. I also watched the Patton Oswalt stand-up, and that was really fun. I don't know if you know Patton Oswalt's story, that his lovely wife passed away, and he got remarried to Meredith Salinger. Wow. It's neat. He says something that I just think is so beautiful. He says, run toward love. Run toward love. I felt like I needed to write that out and stick it on my wall so I could look at it every day. Because love means a lot of different things. It's not just physical love or romantic love, if you will. It's it's just good things. It's the things that fill you up. Run toward that stuff. I love that idea. I mean, it's such a simple idea, but it sort of escapes us in the cacophony of the world. Run toward love. Full speed. I dig it. Anyway, as I mentioned, links page is at heyhumanpodcast.com. Definitely reach out to me if you'd like. Please rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast. It's so very helpful. I know it takes a minute, but do this for me if you can. I'd really appreciate it. And if you feel like donating to Hey Human podcast, that would also be great. You can do that on the main front page of heyhumanpodcast.com. Every little bit helps immensely. Thank you to those of you who have already donated. I am beyond words, but thank you and love you, and I appreciate it so, so very much. Especially in these crazy times where none of us really know where our next paycheck is coming from. And somebody like me who's in the arts, that everything is revolving around other people wanting to ingest the arts, whether it's my painting or my music that I write, or this podcast for that matter. So I really do appreciate those of you who have donated, and it means the world to me. So all right, that's what I got, and looking forward to you hearing this episode. Again, some really fun ones coming up as well. It's good stuff, keeping me sane in a topsy-turvy world. Thanks for listening, everybody. Here we go. Thanks for agreeing to this.
Sure. Have we met in 3 dimensions?
We have at Wine and Song.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna turn down the volume here just a hair.
Sure.
Groovy.
I'm very nervous, but
You are?
I'm trying. Yeah, I know, but I'm trying to be a soldier about it. So
I appreciate that. Well, Chauncey Bowers, welcome to Hey Human Podcast.
Hey.
I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show, being socially distant and all.
This is a good time, I think, for this kind of show.
I think you're right. Yeah, people are finally slowed down enough where you can wrangle them in.
Yeah.
Where are you in Pasadena right now?
Yeah, well, North Alhambra, just like half a block away from South Pasadena. That's why I can end up at Wine and Song so easily, so often.
Yeah.
And just so I can just annoy people every week if I want to.
I met you there with Mark Islam.
Yeah.
And you had performed a song called Helmet, among others, that night, but that one really stood out to me. And I loved it. It was so bright and fun. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's a human being I want to talk to.
Thank you. Yeah. That's the circus song where I have to wear a helmet because I'm being shot out of a cannon. And then, it turns out to just be a public service announcement eventually.
Yeah, I love it. Your music is very witty and dry. It's very English humor, I think.
That's a compliment. I know what you mean.
Yeah. Let's go back to the beginning of you. You were raised up in Georgia?
Yeah, Mississippi till I was maybe 8 or so. And then most of my next life was in Georgia. We moved around every few years. My father worked for the government, and so if we liked a place, we would stay there 5 years. That was the maximum amount of time. And if my parents didn't like a place, we would move the next year. And so they really liked Mississippi. We stayed there 5 years. Then we moved to, they didn't like Kentucky. That's too far north. So we left there after a year, and then Georgia 5 years.
What was his branch in the government? What did he do?
He was a veterinarian for, Department of Agriculture.
Oh, what a neat job.
It's an interesting job. It is. His entry-level job was meat inspection at a slaughterhouse, right? That's apparently how you start once you get your fancy veterinarian degree. He worked his way up to getting promoted to go to Washington, D.C. So when we moved from Georgia, we actually moved to Maryland because he'd finally gotten this promotion that he'd been working for.
Did that instill an interest in science when you were young?
No. He unfortunately, he passed away when I was pretty young, and so the science came up a little later based on misadventures I had that indicated my understanding of physics was from cartoons. And so I thought I should really maybe knuckle down and figure out how the world works.
Was it the Wile E. Coyote anvil that caught your attention?
It really was. Like I said, some friends of mine gave me $5 to ride my bicycle into the swimming pool, and I had wanted to do that anyway. So I thought they were foolish for giving me money for it, and they thought I was foolish for wanting to ride my bicycle into the swimming pool. And in my mind, if I got enough speed, I would just sort of skip across the surface like a rock, and that was in my head. That's what was going to happen, and that is not what happened. And as I was wrapped around the handlebars, crotch first, I was thinking, I need to look into this whole physics thing.
How old are you when that happened?
About 13 or 14. But, this was before it was so easy to see these idiots do this on the internet so you could get some warning. I was working it out myself, and not very well.
Yeah, it is very interesting to me that you bring up the YouTube challenges and things that you can see how it doesn't work over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Darwin chuckles and lets it rip, I suppose.
Yeah, if I had access to that, I think I wouldn't have done it. I just it just seemed like a good idea to me at the time. And there was a couple of things like that, but that was one that was really memorable. And like I said, I started maybe a quarter of a mile away, so I could just get up a really good head of steam. And there was not a muscle in my body that thought I would stop immediately when my first part of my bicycle hit the water. I was thinking I could make it to the other side of the pool, but I felt like I was optimistic and I might just skip for a while and gently sink. But in fact, it just stopped instantly, and I, of course, continued forward at whatever velocity I had achieved. And like I say, my crotch kind of hit the handlebars. I wrapped around it like a sad little slug shrinking, and then we sank into the swimming pool. It was, like I say, it caught my attention. Yeah,
as you hit that still water pool, and it was like a concrete wall.
It just took, again, and I should have known that. I had no idea. And then but you can see how there's a Wile E. Coyote aspect to this. I just had this image of all things going very well.
It is astounding that any of us survive our childhood from all the mishaps and misadventures we take.
It's true. No, I wouldn't survive most of them now, that's for sure.
Yeah. What did moving around so much as a kid change your songwriting? I know you were a scientist. You retired from that, and you are a performing songwriter now. And your songs are very smart. They're very Leonard Cohen comes to mind. John Prine comes to mind.
Yeah, no, he's one of them.
And who two are absolutely phenomenal, obviously. And to be in that echelon, it's pretty astounding. And I remember sitting there in the audience listening to you perform, and I thought, you just don't hear stuff like this very often. You not only tell a story, but you really think about the people in the story. You think they have backstory, they have features. It's really great.
No, those people you met, that's really who I learned it from. I mean, when I was growing up, Leonard Cohen, John Prine, and then Randy Newman, they taught me, first of all, they taught me that you didn't have to sing very well to perform a song, and that was important. It still is. But also, they were great storytellers, and they could capture a lot in a phrase. And so I used to just hang on John Prine and Randy Newman especially. And Randy Newman does this thing that I also like to do, which is he takes on what's called the unreliable narrator, right, where he is singing sort of in first person and making observations about the world that really aren't accurate. but he believes him, and so I learned that from Randy. He's just one of my favorite people.
He could have invented Facebook with that attitude.
Yes, we could. Just let's go somewhere where we can make stuff up
and believe it with every ounce of our being.
Believe it. Yep.
Yeah. So moving around so much, the characters you met along the way in childhood, were you aware then that they were in fact characters, or was your childhood more blissful and unawares?
It was up until around the swimming pool. It was blissful and unawares. After that, honestly, I started paying more attention to everything, to people, to what it meant for what a good friend meant. For example, how they acted versus just people you ran into. That all started. A lot of things started to come together there for several reasons, but I assume, just like everybody, everything that happened to me somehow feeds into how I think and how I see the world.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know if you might have heard, but I mean, partly when I was in Maryland, I helped this shady character repossess cars, and that kind of thing, again, it sticks with you. And looking back, I'm not sure we were always repossessing the cars, and so at the time, it never occurred to me that anything else could be going on.
And how old were you when that was happening?
I was 16. I just got my driver's license. And so when this guy asked me to repossess cars with him, he would go down. His story was that because he had money, it was clear he was pretty well off, but he enjoyed repossessing cars. And he would only go repossess cars when someone else had tried and had an altercation with the owner. And so then the car dealer would call him, and he'd go in, and basically we would just go in at night and take the car. Right? And so again, at the time, it didn't occur to me that this was a lot like stealing a car. This had all of the same nuance. I'm pretty sure most of them were righteous repossessions, but every once in a while, I just don't know. This guy turned out to be an odd fellow.
Did you ever get into an altercation as a repo man? Or a repo man adjacent?
Yeah, I was adjunct assistant repo man for a few months when I was 16. Because I figured I'm 16, I have a driver's license. I don't see a downside to driving these cars out of neighborhoods that I would never normally visit. So, there was a couple of close calls, I think, where people in the neighborhood clearly knew we weren't from the neighborhood, and kind of gathered around the back of it, because I was in charge of getting the repossessed car back to the garage. And again, when I think about it, I'm always in that car. He's never in there. But I kind of had to make a decision about if I was going to call their bluff about them moving out of my way, or let whatever they wanted to do to me happen. So it was a couple of tricky moments.
That's why it was short-lived, I suppose.
Well, I had to move away. I moved away, but it was going to be short-lived. I mean, he turned out to be a not wholly trustworthy, individual. It turns out. I never. He said he was an airline pilot. That's why he had money, and he eventually married a friend of mine who was in college at the time. And later she was talking to his parents and saying, this. Because he was away, he'd put on his pilot uniform and leave for a few days and come back, and they told a pilot he doesn't have a job.
Wait, hold on, you're breaking up a lot. So wait, no, it's okay. I think I got the gist of it. So your friend married this man.
Yes, that's how I met him, was through her, in fact.
Okay, and he would don his pilot's uniform and leave for a few days at a time because to her knowledge, he was an airline pilot.
Yes, and he'd call her from whatever town he was in. At least that's what we thought.
And then she talked to his parents.
His parents, yeah. And they said, he's not a pilot. We're wealthy, and he has money because we give him money. And so, to my friend's credit, that was a deal breaker.
Oh, my God.
But we don't know where he was going. I mean, he could have had a whole nother life somewhere doing the same thing, right? I mean, it's kind of a pretty little setup.
Catch me if you can.
Yeah. No, yeah. So I was happy not to live there anymore when that all finally came out.
Wow.
That's who I was repossessing cars with. That's what started me thinking, whoa, he's not even a pilot.
And he might not have been a repo man. Although you did return the cars, I suppose, so.
No, I'm pretty sure, like I say, it's just hard to know. And if you kind of read about, like that movie, Repo Man, it's one of my favorite movies. But
it's a great movie.
There's always the gray area. I mean, there's a mix of, this is really a repossession. And then there's, could you pick this one up too? So honestly, I was 16. I did the due diligence you would expect from a 16-year-old.
Sure.
I don't know what the hell I was doing.
It's hilarious. When your father passed away, did you then move from Maryland to Pasadena, or was there?
We moved back to Georgia then.
Okay.
But that's where I'd been last. We lived in Maryland only a couple of years, and those were, I went back to the same high school I'd gone to before, so it was just a very familiar thing to do, which was nice at that point. To have something familiar to go back to and friends, that kind of thing.
It must have been surreal to lose your dad so young.
It's not a good age. I was, like I say, 15, 16, something like that, 16. And it was just sad because he had worked most of his life to get to Maryland, and because he worked in Washington, D.C., we lived in Maryland. And, within a year, he's diagnosed with cancer, and less than a year, he's gone. So wow. It was rough.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a long time ago.
Do you have siblings?
Yeah, a brother and a sister. I'm the youngest. My sister passed away a few years ago. And my brother, he still lives until recently he lived in Georgia, but he's moved to North Carolina. So most of my family stayed in the South.
Mm-hmm. I lived in Nashville for 13 years before I moved here.
That counts as the South.
I think it does, yeah.
And so you've been in California how long?
A little under a year.
Oh, okay, not too long.
Not too long.
No.
Yeah.
And so you came from Nashville to here?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. Just in time to be locked up in my house.
Yeah. That's funny, yes.
But that's all right. It can't last forever, they say, whoever they are. According to Facebook, it can't last forever.
Yeah, I think they're right about that. And probably better to be sheltered in California than Nashville.
Yes, because the weather, firstly, has made all the difference in the world. Having sunshine when you're already borderline depressed about everything it makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's a thing. It is.
Yeah, absolutely. The weather in Nashville and the winter weather and even the spring starts to feel pretty abysmal, honestly.
Yeah. And they've had some bad storms recently.
They have, yeah. Some of my friends had very devastating. Their houses lost, everything they owned lost, injuries, things like that. So, it was not a very good situation. And then to have this on top of it, it's just, life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the pool incident began your contemplation. What got you into sciences specifically? And also to that end, what branch of science did you go into?
Probably, so when I moved back to Georgia, probably the biggest influence of like real science was in the high school I was in. There was a truly phenomenal chemistry teacher, and for high school especially, he had like a 2-year course, like you take what would be maybe normal high school chemistry, and then he had sort of an advanced another year of it or so, and I adored him, and I loved chemistry, and so when I graduated high school, I went to Georgia Tech because that was in state, and I couldn't afford going out of state, but luckily Georgia Tech's a great school, and so I majored in chemistry there, and mainly organic chemistry, synthesis stuff, and then I loved it, and got to do a little research near the end of my time in college, and so then after college I applied to some graduate schools because I thought if I just stayed in school, maybe I'd never have to get a job. And so it turns out it's insidious the way you end up having to work for a living, even if you go to school forever. So then I went off to graduate school up in Boston, which is sort of a culture shock in itself. I'd spent most of my time in the South. Boston's
winter alone, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's everything. It was if culture shock could kill you, I'd be dead. Yeah. It was fun, though. And a lot of wonderful people I met up there. I lived there for maybe 6 or 7 years.
You got your doctorate, and you're research scientist. Yeah. Your doctorate is in chemistry, or is it in?
It's in pharmacology. My research is mainly cell biology and neurobiology. I did cell biology on nerve cells mainly, and then I moved to San Francisco for a postdoc, which is yet again another culture shock for an old Southern boy like myself.
Yeah,
I loved San Francisco. I just loved it. As soon as I moved there, I was just so happy.
Yeah, it's a great city. Absolutely. I just read an abstract last night, like 2 a.m. I've had insomnia the past couple nights, but it was about these researchers who stated that the brain, when faced with PTSD, can alter the effects of immunization. It's really fascinating.
Really?
Yeah.
So the brain is, it is really, it's like, it's an understatement. It's just, it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of reasons. And I used to spend a lot of time, and this may not, a lot of people probably don't know this, but I spent a lot of time trying to get evidence for what most people call paranormal parapsychology, that kind of stuff. Auras, almost anything you can think of, that, especially in the 70s, plants having feelings, and I went some effort to reproduce those things because they were published in these weird journals. And my feeling was, and they look fine in terms of numbers. This is when I'm getting into science and understanding how to do statistics, and I'm going, well, this is true. I'm just going to repeat it and publish it in a real journal. Because this transforms how you think about the world. Any one of these things, right? People kind of believe in 100 things that are crazy, and part of my response is just pick one. If one of those is true, it changes everything. And so I spent a lot of time trying to, because I really wanted them to be true. That was the first thing. And I forget why I went this direction, but I spent some time trying to, because I could see auras, and so I thought, well, seeing them is not proof, but so maybe I can get a picture, or maybe I can do something with them that is, documentable, right? In other words, I can see something that other people can't see because I can see its aura, and I went through a bunch of stuff, and dermo-optics. The Russians had a whole series of articles about people being able to see light and even read newspapers. I thought that was unlikely, but the fundamental thing was that you could kind of detect things you could take visual things with your skin, and so I set up a whole experiment to try and see if that could be true.
Are you talking about remote viewing, or are you talking about actually imbibing words from a page into your fingertips?
Well, that was the high end of the Russian claim, was that they had people who could do that, but the lower end was simply that, for example, you could detect whether a light was on or off with your hand, right? That's sort of the lowest end. But they had people, and again, it was in their literature. It was in what was considered reasonable psychology journals, and which is how I got the psychology department at Georgia Tech to let me try and reproduce one of these things, because it was in a journal. But Russian relationship to science back then, especially, it was government influenced, and they weren't that careful, it turns out. But and I tried to, the famous experiment of, the plants responding to you as you approach them, even before you water them, as you just approach them with water and talk nicely to them. I thought, well, that's a slam dunk. I know I can get that to happen. But it turns out once you do the controls, once you do the right controls, it just goes away. It was never there.
Explain to folks what the control group means, because for some people don't know what that means.
For drugs, there's a control group. For most experiments, there's just controls. There's just, and this is something, I tell you the truth, having stopped being a bench top scientist, having kind of retired and playing more music, I realized that being a scientist is a truly unnatural thing to be. It is not what we are inclined to do. Our brains are more like lawyers. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that we're more prone to think as an advocate, right? That we came to a conclusion based on God knows what, And from then on, we're just looking for confirmation of that.
Mm-hmm. Confirmation bias is a huge part of the human condition.
It is. And there's many more biases than that. But what often you'll see, when you see evidence against you, you'll just get really nuanced about why that might not be true. Whereas evidence on your side, you just go, well, of course that's true. And there's no kind of balance of trying to get at the truth, frankly. Right? Whereas in science, if you don't question evidence that supports your idea, another scientist will, and they'll destroy you, right? It's not that scientists are that, cool. It's just that we have a business model that makes us vulnerable to not taking seriously data and how to interpret it and how to explain it. And so by controls, that's what I mean is that, I would work to see, I would sort of teach myself how to see auras because I felt it was fascinating and it wasn't hard to do. And when I first did that, I was pretty young, and so it took me longer than it should have to know what the right control was. But the bigger issue is what scientists do more than most people is when they get data that supports their hypothesis, they still question it. They're still not. They want to know why that could be wrong. How could I still be wrong? Because again, if you don't do it, some other person will.
Right, and I think for me that's the biggest frustration when I see articles written that are so anti-science, and I don't think people understand that science is out to prove things wrong. They're not out to prove it right. There's a million scientists trying to prove why something isn't correct.
Right. No, we really don't want to be wrong in print. I mean, people would get away with it, but the point is every other scientist knows, and it's just right there, and it's public. I mean, again, from a scientist, not everyone can read these kind of research papers, but you're writing a research paper generally for other scientists.
Sure. And it takes some work. It does. The abstract I read last night, I read it maybe 5 or 6 times before the meat of it really sunk in. But, being willing to put in the work for something that sparks your interest, I think is half the battle.
It is half the battle, and having a truly curious mind in the sense of you actually do want to know. And it's just, like I say, it's not a superpower. It's just, I don't think that is our natural inclination. And it is a lot of what we teach. Like, I ended up teaching a lot of graduate students, when they're getting their degree, right? And one of the things you end up focusing on is how to think critically. I resist that phrase because it's so often used, but you can be very smart and not do that very well. And a lot of what you teach graduate students, because most of the graduate students coming in have degrees in some hard science, they're smart. There's no doubt they're smart. And it's just, but teaching them how to read a paper and not just how to trash it. A lot of them think that's what smart is, just trash this paper. Let's just see how we can trash it. You can kind of always find something wrong with, anything, frankly, but certainly a research paper. But the more challenge is like what here is probably right and what here isn't, and let's figure, and whatever's right, let's move on from there to the next experiment. So they can, like I say, there's a large part of teaching graduate school that's that. And so for the paranormal stuff, it varied a lot for any specific experiment, the control would be different. And so, for example, for auras, the theory is anyway that the person is sort of emanating that somehow, right? And again, it gets very vague once you try to get past that. But I was seeing him, so what the hell? But the control becomes if I have a person in front of me, if I have a way of seeing someone's aura, and I block them out, can I still see the aura? And the answer was no. So that sort of rules out that I'm seeing something emanating from them. Basically, it was all... I can explain most of it now that I understand neurobiology better and all of the cognitive biases that we bring to every observation. That's why it ended up being the brain is dark and noisy.
I call it deep space.
Yeah, it's a great name for it because... I saw auras as well as I'm seeing, you right now, but they weren't there.
But, okay, so in that, what was your theory to what you were seeing? And I'm assuming you're talking about colors, or are you?
Yeah, eventually I could see colors. Colors would change when people's moods changed. I also, did a fair amount of what they now would call, back then it was astral projection, and then it went to outer body experience. But I got to where I could do that, and it still is probably the most fascinating subjective state I've ever experienced. And now it's probably more appropriate to call it lucid dreaming, but it doesn't take away from how incredible the experience is, where you have your lucid mind inside of a dream. It's a very interesting juxtaposition, but again, early on, this is a control early. So that happened the first time I was able to get out of my body. It was just astounding, and I wandered around a little bit in the house, and then I started worrying. I wasn't clear me how I was supposed to get back, so I started worrying about how much time so then I just focused on how do I get back in my body, because the point is I'd sat up in bed and turned around and I was still lying down in the bed, and so I was like, how do I get back in? And so that the first couple of times I wanted to make sure that worked. It was reversible, but then at least the theory I was working on, that's why we call it astral. There's an astral plane, and I'm kind of experiencing, and I'm that sort of stuff. In other words, that the basic assumption is there really is a me that can see from someplace other than behind my eyes, and I can take that and go look at other things, right? And so, but again, it's easy to test that. I mean, first of all, can I go look at something that I wouldn't normally know what it is and find out what it is, right? So that control is pretty straightforward. You could call that control or just another experiment, because it doesn't mean I'm not having this subjective experience. The question is this subjective experience mean I'm actually out of my body looking at something over here when I'm actually over there?
Is that like something like somebody writing on a piece of paper in another room, and then you can go look at it and then come back and then report what you've seen?
Yeah, like they can put it somewhere. Somebody could put something in, I knew I could get to from the astral plane, but I didn't see it or do, and then I go see if I can, and I've not only done that for myself, but other people who I call it guided out of body experience under hypnosis. I thought maybe we'd have more success if it was someone else having the experience and I was just saying, go look at this. But again, every time it came down to something that you would go, that's the proof. The whole thing just went away.
So you don't now believe in aura and or astral projection?
No, I don't have it. I mean, I wanted them to be true, and then when I did the controls, nothing I had seen or experienced. Again, I stand by how fascinating lucid dreaming is, but it's not. It's not parapsychology, and that's what the brain is. What's fascinating here, like I said, there are nooks and crannies in your brain that you have to go through naked, and it is fascinating.
What then were you seeing?
Well, for the out-of-body experience, that's, like I said, we now call that lucid dreaming. And you can learn to do that. These exercises, to that, they are remarkably similar to how people learned how to astral project. So, but lucid dreaming, but sleep researchers didn't even believe that could be true. They did not think that a person could have that waking type lucidity while they were dreaming. And so
it's badass. I love doing that. I learned how to do that when I was little because I had very severe nightmares, and it was a way to stop that.
Yeah, and so there's levels of lucidity, and so one of them is just, this is a dream, I'm out of here, right? But when you really, the level of lucidity I'm talking about is you're in a nightmare and there's a monster coming, and you just say, no, there's not. You're not scared. Because that's you coming at you. That's your own head, right? You're in a dream, right? Think about how you think right now, putting that in a dream. If there was a monster, you would just go, this is a dream. I can make that go away. And you can. Like I say, and then, so it became clear because of these controls I was doing, experiments, that what I was really seeing was, my best memory of what the room looked like, right? No, I'm walking around the house, I'm doing stuff, I'm actually banging on walls trying to wake up people, saying, let's left something, I'm out of my body. Yeah. And once it became clear that wasn't what was happening, but I was having that experience, then for me the question became, what will I see if I can stop making up this room, right? Like I know I'm making the room up, and so then I was trying to see what happened if I could make that construct go away and still be in that state of mind. You see what I'm saying?
What if the astral plane is a matrix where you are making up the rooms as you go, though?
Yeah, well, if I can't see or know anything from there that I don't know anyway, at some point you've concocted an untestable idea that no longer...
What about auras? What do you think those are?
The kind of auras, the classic aura, where you see around people in their hands and they change colors. Like I said, I can attest to all that. And auric bonds, I've seen people who were in love and there was like an auric bond between them. It is, and honestly, I could pass my hand through that and it wasn't subtle. But I learned to make that up. I mean, we underestimate what our brains can do in terms of what we see, and that's why scientists, we even question what the hell we see.
So if you can't prove it through these studies, these trials, if you would, then is that an absolute that it doesn't exist? I think about when we were young, we didn't know quarks existed, but they did, even though we didn't know they did. So if you don't know, it's that sort of what is it? The cat in the box.
Oh yeah, Schrodinger.
Schrodinger's cat. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a whole cottage industry where once you show this thing's not true, then they make up some other permutation. Well, yeah, but this will be true. And at some point, I just go, well, you show me. I mean, I'm done looking for certain things. So, but the point is, me kind of doing the experiment for auras showed that what I thought they were wasn't true. Mm-hmm. Right? And the same for the astral projection. What I thought I was doing and what I had been told I was doing, not true. Mm-hmm. Right? That there's something else that I didn't check. I can't ever say, but every single thing I've ever tried, from plant awareness to, they go away when you do the right experiment.
Interesting. Do you still see auras, even though you? No.
I could. I think. Because I worked to do it, and I probably could do it again. I don't anymore. I don't. They're just distracting. But I always had to kind of get a kind of a poorly lit. There was still a process even when I was seeing them. I wouldn't necessarily see them when else. People say in a well lit area. But also anyway, I didn't mean to go on about that.
It's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's early on. It was that thing of, okay, this appears absolutely true to me. How could I be wrong? And so as I got better at science, but even as late as graduate school, the aura thing was still bugging me, and because I'd been trying to take a picture of them, because I said that's how to convince other people and I'd use special film, UV, infrared, and then all this stuff, trying to figure out how to get a picture of them. And for some reason in grad school, it occurred to me that if the wavelengths of an aura were blocked by glass, it would never get through the lens of a camera, right? And so this is my last hurrah of trying to get auras on film, which was I made a pinhole camera, right? And you get the right film that will be sensitive to UV. There's there's nothing in between that film and whatever you're trying to, and it's just not very efficient. So somebody, usually me, has to sit still for about 20 minutes to get an image of the person. But then the question was, do you see it now that you've taken away the glass? Do you see how hard I'm trying to prove this damn thing? Nothing. Huh. It's a cool picture, though.
Yeah.
Very cool picture, because it's like, black light, and I'm sitting there for 20 minutes, and every time I open my eyes like glow like orbs. So it was a very cool picture. But,
think about a museum that I was in once. It was a science museum, although I can't recall where. And there was a apparatus, when you stood in front of it, it showed your heat signatures. It showed what parts of and it was green and red and orange and yellow. and different parts of your body lit up in different color pattern. And I thought, well, maybe to me that seemed like a rudimentary example of what an aura would be. Is this that we are all energetic? So.
No, we are. No, so if you go there, then there's no argument. I mean, we create electromagnetic fields. Small, but they're there in terms of the way our nervous system works. So that you could, if you have sensitive enough equipment that you can detect that's just going to be true. But that's a different question to me.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about, you're basically at the temperature of people's skin in different areas of the body. And, to me, that's not related to auras, but it's.
Right, I'm just saying the similarity of the color spectrums and things. Yeah.
Well, you might remember that this was also something I had to look into when it was Kirlian photography. Right, there was a whole form of photography that was meant to be able to capture electromagnetic fields around people, and the famous one was a leaf, where you set it on a static and electric field near some film, and what you see is not only the leaf, but you see this thing around the leaf. And so Kirlian photography was big for a while of proof that you could, that auras were real. But again, when you did the right control, it went away.
Have you seen the experiments with the water where they take glass of water and look at them microscopically and they see what happens when you microwave it or if you yell at it or...
Yeah, that's just complete bullshit.
Those are fascinating, though, the photography from that stuff.
No, it is, but I don't know what they're doing there. I mean, I've said on more than one occasion, if there is such thing as magic in the physical world, it's water. I mean, water is an extraordinary substance. But these things they're talking about, there's not a single... I mean... We don't even have to talk about getting details about controls. There's not even a compelling experiment. What you see is what you're somebody puts pictures out and says, this is what water looks like when you're angry, this is what it looks like when you're happy. And it's, if that was remotely true, you wouldn't have to go to that one guy and look at his pictures. I mean, because like I say, this changes everything, right? Because the water has a structure, but it is on the level of nanoseconds and less. That's how permanent that structure is. The idea that you could influence by thought, again, it changes everything.
Well, we like to anthropomorphize things, right? Because it gives us an understanding of what a thing is. And there's a part of me that thinks, okay, I'm glad. I talk to my plants all the time.
Sure.
And I say, are you thirsty? Do you want to be watered today? And I feel like they either say yes or no, and I respond to that.
Yeah, but I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, it's only... I have some very specific magical thoughts of my own that I hold dear, and I think you probably can't be fully human without some, because otherwise you're just probably a sociopath. I mean, we have to sort of make these leaps of why care, why attend to things. Why, there's a lot of
it makes the world more interesting. It makes the world more interesting, and to me, those feelings. It's like Walden, it gives you a sense that you are not alone. You are the tree. You are the leaf,
Yeah. No, and I think feeling that kind of connectivity is actually a healthy thing. And if it means talking to a plant, I have no problem with that. I mean, I talk to my cats, and I'm pretty sure they're not that much better than a plant about like giving a shit what I'm doing. But I find it very sweet to talk to them, and they just stare at me usually. I don't want to, because I actually get annoyed with people who seem like they want to surgically remove all magical thoughts from everybody, that somehow it'll be a better world without them. And I don't believe that. I think we desperately need magical thoughts because there's categories of things that are incommensurable. And the way humans deal with those categories is magical thought and ritual, frankly. We do rituals, right? So the classic example is if a loved one of yours dies, you have now two categories of things on you. You have a loved one who still looks alive probably, but they're dead. You also have a problem, getting ready to have a problem with disease and other things that are bad are going to happen as they sit there and decay. Right? In other words, there's an offensive aspect to a dead body. On top of that, this still looks like my mother, right? That's what I mean by incommensurable worlds. Those two categories don't fit. And the way every culture on Earth deals with it is a ritual. And they do the ritual to make it clear that this is not just throwing out the trash. To me, that's captures why this stuff's important.
My friend Russ and I were talking about death the other day, and he talked about when his father died, and it was a group of us on Zoom actually, but so he wasn't just talking to me, but he was talking about that when his father passed away, that the being that was his father was no longer present, and that he took offense to this body masquerading as his father. And I thought that was so beautiful. It was such a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot, yeah. But there is still this visceral, and I mean, again, if you can, I think it's lovely, I think, what he was saying, and I agree with it. But especially early on, there's a visceral recognition of this being, or if you want, having been a loved one, that is at odds with what you now have to do. But no, I think, but again, I think if we saw someone who came across a dead body and just sat on it like a log, we would be suspicious of that person.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, that's what I mean.
Well, getting into the idea of fact versus biases and things. One man's fact is another man's fiction these days. Now, I follow you on Facebook, and I see you you're posting things daily, trying to have a voice of reason, I suppose is the best way to put it.
I'm trying to kind of, I guess I'm doing something. I keep doing it, yes.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
One of the
your image is frozen completely on my computer.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, that's.
It's okay.
Am I making a funny face?
No, you look very intent. But then earlier when I was talking, and you did change your facial expression. At first I was worried. Oh, I'm not staying.
I thought I was having a stroke.
I stopped being engaging, whatever, if I was ever.
Should I stop it and recalibrate?
I don't know.
Is it frozen right now?
Yeah, it's frozen.
All right, let me hang up and I'll call you right back.
Okay.
Yay.
This is the first time I've used FaceTime or anything really, and so I'm out of my element.
Well, you're doing very well. Thank you.
Okay.
The only issue is that sometimes it does freeze, and so somebody will say something, and especially because I'm recording it, yes, I have to get you to repeat the whole thing that you've said, and all
sure.
that. So getting back to my question, one of the things that fascinates me about humans is that, and I get it. So here we are. There's this virus going on right now, and there are so many. It's a terrible thing. It's just to many people it seems like out of left field. Although to a lot of us who follow science things, it's this was just a matter of time, and of course. But for those people who are not thinking about that stuff every day, which is fine, it's seemingly coming out of left field, and then they come up with they need something to make it a touchstone. They need to find their own sense of it, and in doing so, sometimes they choose, in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, but these really strange, far-reaching theories that seem way more illogical than just the logic of DNA mixing with DNA and doing what viruses do. Why do you think people do that? I'm curious.
No, that's not my. But it is, like the 5G thing is just, wow, you don't know anything about anything. You don't know about electromagnetic waves. You don't know about virus. And yet you have come to this conclusion, with resounding energy, and it boggles me. And again, because I've been a scientist most of my life, and for most of my adult life, truly almost every minute of every day was with another scientist, either working. But even when I went to lunch, my wife and I, we would go on, my wife's a scientist as well. We would go on vacations with people who were scientists. And so coming out of that, some of it is encouraging. I mean, there's just some very smart people floating around who, aren't trained at all, but they're just smart people and they're curious people. But there's a bunch of people who just, I don't know what they're doing. I really don't. Like the 5G is a good example, but just in general, I understand being confused by this, but what I don't really understand is why not ask somebody who has studied it their entire life?
Well, what I find
why not just start there? Just start there.
Sure. My father's a nuclear physicist, and one of my dear friends very strongly believes that 5G is in line with the coronavirus, and that the 5G destroys your immune system, and therefore you're susceptible to this virus, and that's a big governmental conspiracy to control us and all that. So I said, do me a favor. Like, I'm going to connect you. You can ask my dad any question in the world. Just ask him whatever. And my father, bless him, gave very lovely, succinct, not too brainiac explanations describing your microwave and talking about back in the day when there were radio waves that were very powerful and they damaged people, but that they figured out, okay, don't point those at people, point them upwards, and the whole 9 yards. Just response after response, very calm, very succinct. And my friend still, nope, it's got to be this other thing. And I just find it, and everyone, of course, is entitled to their own opinion about things, but I think it gets dangerous.
Maybe they are, maybe they're not.
Yeah, it gets dangerous because it spreads like its own virus, and then people make choices, and if you want to jeopardize yourself based on your choices, that's fine. You have every right and dominion over yourself. But unfortunately, that is not the general consequence. The general consequence is you endanger multitudes.
Yeah, often because you're muddying the waters, if nothing else. And there's people who, but I don't know. I really don't understand that. I mean, I don't know because to me it's very exciting to actually find out something really. And whereas making shit up is pretty easy. And so I don't understand the joy so much of making shit up compared to just doing a little, because honestly, as far as I can tell, the amount of time some of these people spend online, if they just did half of that to just like see what people who know what they're talking about. But even for stuff that I post and somebody, it'll be like, genetically engineered crops or, artificial sweetener. I've done this thing. I mean, the equivalent of your dad, just really trying to be patient and walk through what these things are, first of all. And if they stick around to listen, half the time they just go, well, you've been indoctrinated, right?
Yeah.
My experience as a scientist and training as a scientist does not give me any status about these topics. At some point, they just feel like you've allowed yourself to become indoctrinated by the system, and that's why you're saying the same things I see when I go to people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's
I watched this really interesting video that actually the same guy sent me, and what was so ironic about him sending this to me was I don't know that he actually understood the video, because I don't mean that in a cruel way. I mean that in a way that, so it is a former KGB operative who had defected to the United States, and it was sometime in the 80s because he references Walter Mondale, and he's talking about how the Russian narrative of coming into America and completely destroying it over not one generation, not two generations, but 3 generations through a systemic disease of misinformation and separating the masses to be pitted against each other. Yes. And there was something that he said in this video that was so that was the moment for me. He said, we are so good at this that in 30 years' time, you'll be able to take someone by the hand and show them something that is absolutely the truth, and they will look you square in the eye and say it's a lie.
Yeah. No, as you know, we're close to that.
We are there. I think we are there.
The Russian influence and they're just sort of incessant tweaking partisan divide, that's demonstrable. I mean, just in terms of them doing it, it's demonstrable. And to me, it's the shrillness of some of these debates about obvious stuff. It just speaks to the success of it. I find it kind of depressing.
Yeah, it's super depressing. And I think that that's where these things start. I think that the misinformation machine is so powerful at this point. And people are eating it like it's cake and ice cream, because that at least somehow, if you think you live in a random world where things like a virus can take out, like for instance, 1918, take out 50 million people, that's terrifying. But if you can say, no, Mr. Johnson is building a tower that's zapping us, and that's what's making us sick, well, then we have Mr. Johnson to blame, and that's soothing, I think, to a lot of people.
Yeah. And really, I just don't know the psychology of this very well, but some of it is, like you say, it's a desire to have some control over the world. Some that you feel like it's not just random stuff.
Yeah.
And because that's another thing. I mean, I'm not sure I've posted anything recently, but I often will talk about how non-intuitive randomness is, and that very few people know it when they see it, which is partly why epidemiologists and places like the CDC, because people think random means evenly distributed. And that's pretty much the opposite of random. You're always going to have little pockets and clusters of points in random. And if you're in one of those pockets of points, you really think something's happening to you that's special. But it takes a larger view of statistics to go, no, you're still that's still random.
Oh, that's another thing, is the specialness of us. I think that we as humans do desire specialness. We want to think that our experiences happen solely to us or to the people we love or whatever. But
or then because again, of us, right?
Yeah, or because of us, absolutely. Yeah. That we are exerting a force upon the universe that then responds in kind. Now, I personally believe in the power of manifestation, but it's a tiered sort of situation. My desire meeting my fortitude and stubbornness and all the things. I do think it aligns. I also believe in serendipity. It's a confluence for me.
No, I'm with you, but really, I mean, and some of it is the idea that you can kind of make certain types of things happen. I mean, that comes right out of studying placebos, right? I mean, it is placebos have a bad reputation in my opinion. They're great. I mean, give me a good placebo response any day. There's not that many side effects, right? And I know people who are just phenomenal about controlling their pain levels or whatever. And that's just really documentable. But it speaks to how much power we have over ourselves that we don't normally exercise, put it that way. And so it's fascinating to me that for placebos, also for hypnotics. So I spent some time. For about a year or two, I hypnotized people. It was part of this parapsychology thing. But I learned to hypnotize people so I could get them more receptive to certain suggestions that I wanted to make about, the astral plane or whatever. But what struck me, first of all, was how easy it was to do. And I just said, they're screwing with me. These are people I know, and they're just screwing with me. And so early on, I took one person's arm and I kind of suggested it was anesthetic. It didn't have any feeling in it. And she'd go, yeah, no. And I kind of touched it. I said, you see how you can't feel anything? She goes, yeah. I said, I'm going to stick a needle through it right now. She goes, I don't care. So I stuck a needle all the way through her arm, not through the middle, but, put some skin up and she didn't flinch. She did nothing, right? And I'm not at all saying it's magical. I'm saying she was able to do that with her brain because I didn't do it. I mean, all I did was talk to her. I mean, I'm not touching anybody, right? I'm not doing any magnet thing. I'm just talking in a certain cadence that I'd read about worked. And after talking for just a few minutes, I could stick a needle through her arm and it didn't faze her.
Yeah, that's the deep space of the brain that is unbelievably powerful. And the thing that I love about neuroscience and the brain is that the more we know, the less we know. It's like a never-ending doorway with never-ending doors.
Yes. No, we don't. I don't foresee knowing everything anytime soon.
No, and it's fantastic. It's such a beautiful, wonderful thing.
And that's the other thing about science is we spend a lot of our day saying, I don't know. And I just don't hear that enough from most people. Just, because by definition, we're doing these experiments because we don't know.
Right.
I want to know. And so we live in that world quite a bit, about not knowing. But I just want to return, like placebos, hypnosis, and faith healing, frankly. I put them all in the same category. What, to me, was fascinating is that all of those require concern. In other words, even if it's a doctor giving you a pill or a friend touching you on the head, for some reason it's very difficult to mobilize these things that we can do from scratch. Usually, I think, it requires some other person saying, I will help you. I can get you to do this. I'll hypnotize you. I'll give you this pill. I'll touch you in this way that's going to heal you. Or I'll just even look at you intently over the television. But the point is, somehow we can leverage that to do something we could have done without it. But psychologically, it boils down to just how social we are. We are an incredibly social species. And to me, that's partly reflected in how therapeutic it can be for just another person to care about your state.
That's like the power of prayer, which I very much believe in. To know, they've done a lot of studies on that, to know that so many
and they know it doesn't work unless the person kind of knows. But again, that could be used to dismiss it, but I'm really not trying to do that. I'm saying it highlights the power that we have, and also highlights how truly interconnected we are in terms of how big a deal it is for us to be as social as we are. It's literally therapeutic to have someone else care about us.
I have a theory about... Oh, there goes your connection. Can you still see me?
Oh, I can, yeah.
Okay.
I froze.
You froze. Let me try.
Okay.
I'm going to hang up again. By the way, thank you for indulging me so much.
It's fun to talk to you. It's fun.
What you said there about the need for others, the need to know that that someone is preying on you. In my journey of learning myself and the world at large as I see it, I think that there is an intuitive nature to all of us that we do know when someone's thinking about us, or that, because to me, like, you and I are the same person, or we're part of the same ecosystem. There's that grove of is it ash trees that's all one big tree, but it presents as a forest. I feel very much that about the human race, in that you cut the arm off of one of us and the other one of us feels it in a way, even if it's sublime. And so I do think that we're all connected that way, and that things like prayer and the need for each other, this time more than ever, I think that people are realizing, myself included, who thinks I'm an introvert, and yet realizes how much, even just sitting in a restaurant that's bustling, how that is feeding me.
Yeah. No, other people, and actually, I'm going to balk at whether or not it happens if the person's not there. But to me, again, the power of just knowing other people are around, and like, for lack of another word, being cared about or loved, it's an extraordinary, I think, a physical effect on people that is underrated, but it comes out in these weird, quirky things of placebos and faith healing and hypnosis. But it speaks to how important it is for people, how important other people are, basically. Right,
and placebos work. They've worked
Absolutely.
Time and time again, for sure.
No, and because I was in a pharmacology department in graduate school, they became one of my favorite things to read about and study. And because back before, okay, I'll get in trouble, but before we had all this about informed consent, you could do some amazing stuff with placebos. Tell people it's one thing and it'd be something else, and then look at what happened. And it's extraordinary. These are measurements you can make about reflex time. Right, give somebody a barbiturate, tell them it's amphetamine, and they get faster. It's just remarkable. Again, today you wouldn't be able to do that. Just not that it was hurting anybody, but it's just
Yeah, the 70s were a very interesting time for both the sociological experiments, psychiatry experiments, medical experiments, and the 50s too. I think there was that whole whole MK Ultra thing was. But the MK Ultra brings me to another thing: is the idea of conspiracies. Everyone who poo-pooed the idea that aliens could be among us, and then the Pentagon's like, well, here's the thing, So how do we know, and to know anything, I feel, is to know nothing, and it's exciting to enter the world from this new fawn getting one's steps, because everything is amazing and nothing is. It's such a lovely place to live.
I guess I think it comes closer to everything is, but I do think we know stuff, and it's just we have to be careful about what it is we know and what it is we don't. And it doesn't mean that, like you say, just because we don't know something is true doesn't mean obviously that it's not. And then some things are more likely than others. I mean, this is all it's all about probabilities, and so that's the other thing that's frustrating is. Often somebody will say something to me that's just, to me, a little nuts, and they go, yeah, but it's possible, right? And to scientists, that's not even a question, right? It's probable. It's either probable and it's by how much, right? I mean, there's a probability that all of the air in this room, all of the molecules will go over into the top corner of the room, and I'll start gasping for air. Right? But when I start gasping for air, that's nowhere near the top 10 things I'm going to worry about. Right? It's because it's just incredibly low probability. And it probably won't happen not just in my lifetime, but in the lifetime of everybody on Earth until the end of the universe. That's how improbable it is. But you go, is it possible? Again, that just means nothing to me. It just means you have to be asking the wrong question once you're asking that. Right? And so that's part of, though, this sense of they feel like they may well be right if it's possible, and that's just not how to think about the world, in my opinion. It's not a useful way of thinking. There's some opinions are more informed than others, some things are more probable than others, and that's different than an absolute knowledge, but it's not the same as everything being up in the air.
Why do you think knowledge and curiosity and science and expertise has been vilified so much over the past decade?
I think it clashes into this other thing that we're inclined to do, right? Which is to be an advocate for what you already believe. There's been people, and again, some of it's on scientists and other experts, because the truth or the facts, or whatever, however you want to say it shouldn't ever be used as a hammer. And there are people who feel like they have been kind of beat up by facts in a way that's ugly. I mean, again, in science, often a rowdy group of facts would just kick the ass of my hypothesis, and I just had to come to grips with it, right? But again, most people aren't used to that. And also, that's clearly not personal. As far as I know, nature has nothing against my career as a scientist, right? So I take it not personally. But there's some pretty personal interactions of people using data, and even if they're right, they're not using it to illuminate the situation. It's like your dad was trying to illuminate the situation, illuminate the issue with facts, as opposed to just taking it and beating it over the head with them, right? And those are very different things. And some people, I think, are responding to having felt brutalized by somebody who, was using facts that way. And so I don't always succeed, but I try to avoid being that guy. But it can be very frustrating sometimes, because you do your best and they say, well, you're indoctrinated. So I come back to that because it's really...
It is interesting, too. I mean, to be fair, there is the thing of follow the money. Who's paying for the study? Who's paying for that? Bacon is good for you, paid for by bacon. Bacon is terrible for you, paid for by the Broccoli Foundation. And so you do have to be aware, but that is, again, the strata of knowledge.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
You didn't. No, that was. No. I have broccoli talking to me now, so it's good.
I bristle a little bit about, I see the logic of following the money, but often there's money in most things. It's sort of like one of the things it's a relatively minor issue, but I'm constantly struck by how much aspartame is vilified. This artificial sweetener. There's nothing about it, theoretically or by experiment, that suggests there's anything wrong with it. And yet, of all the artificial sweeteners, it seems to be the most vilified. But honestly, from a chemist perspective, of all of the artificial, and a biologist perspective, of all of them, it is the least likely to cause a problem ever. It is just because of its structure. It's 2 amino acids. There's hardly any you have to take to be sweet. And so I'm struck by how this came to be. And frankly, this kind of thing, just like, there's people outside of there's people tweaking all of these kind of, ideas. But people will sometimes say, well, who did that study or whatever. But honestly, from a scientist point of view, when I read a study, I rarely look at who funded it. Sometimes I will, because it'll read suspicious. In other words, it's rare that somebody just makes up something from whole cloth and publishes it. They're generally massaging the data, and you can see that if you've written and reviewed a bunch of papers, you can see what they're doing. And because again, for the most part, scientists aren't going to just make something up, but they will market it. They'll mess with it, right? And when it gets egregious, that I'll go, who are these people, right? And often it'll be, I see, they're shills. But for the most part, even if it's funded by a drug company, the data is there that you can almost always just tell by reading the paper that this is a marginal effect, or not clear they did this particular control that would have made it go away. And so so with the aspartame thing, for example, there's this thing, the artificial sweetener people, they want you to believe that, whereas there's much more money in the sugar industry than there is in the artificial sweetener industry, right? If you want to talk about known mongers of misinformation, sugar, right? And so artificial sweeteners are not something sugar likes, right? So the point is, the money, if you just wanted to go by money, is probably the sugar industry who's tweaking. Again, they're not going to publish something that's just wrong, but anything that comes out that looks bad for artificial sweeteners, and aspartame in particular, because I would say it is the one that's probably least harmful to anything. But there's going to be money that just, let's put this in this vegan's hands over here. Let's put this in this health website. Let's just make sure they all know what this is about. Right? But so the point is, even when follow the money, people pick the money they like. The cure for that is either to listen to somebody who knows the topic, or learn how to and read it's there. It's usually in the papers.
Yeah, I try and stay away from the papers these days.
Well, they're hard. I mean, they really are written for other scientists. And so
oh no, those papers. I thought you meant newspapers. No, I
meant the research papers.
Yeah, I like reading abstracts. I do. Part of it for the challenge of trying to figure out what the hell's being said, but also I just think it's really exciting to see what people are coming up with. You know, somebody has a theory and they're like, let's see if this is a real thing.
Yeah. No, to me it was, and it's because I still read a lot. But it was a privilege to be given a green light to go interrogate nature, basically. I used to call it a conversation, but it's really not. I mean, we're just trying to hold something much larger than we are down and ask it questions. And, it's a whole art to that, and it's not. You can forget that nature's just way bigger than your question. And so you have to. That's why you have to be careful how you do an experiment. But it's really kind of felt like a privilege to be able to do that. I used to refer to them as a conversation with nature, but in truth, it's more of an interrogation. And what's upside down about it is we're interrogating something much bigger and more complicated than we are, and trying to just eke out some slice of data that will work for the next experiment. But honestly, I always felt like, and still feel like, that it was a privilege to be able to do that, because it takes it's expensive equipment, it takes money, and you have to kind of be trained a long time. It just drives me a little nuts because most of these scientists are in awe of what they study.
I saw a funny Twitter that said, I've never seen so many people get a virology, epidemiology, and medical degree all at once in such a short amount of time.
No, the certainty of these. That's the thing that throws me the most is just the certainty that they have with these ideas. It's, and that it's bioweapons and some of it. Like you say, I understand that they don't understand it because it's specialized knowledge.
Yeah, and it's scary. It's really scary.
Oh, absolutely. But it's just you lose me when you. First of all, I don't believe the people who study them, and then on top of that, you just make something up. You just make something up, or believe somebody who did. I mean, and that's apparently people can't tell the difference between something made up. But the truth is, this virus. I mean, it's only about 1,000 nucleotides long, the whole genome. People all over the world have sequenced, and so we know every single base in that genome. And the idea that there's a bioweapon hidden in there, there's no place to hide. Right? It's just
the thing that strikes me too is some of the people that I know that are really into this idea is that they're like, oh well, there were people working on noroviruses in China, and therefore it means this. I said, well, because there's 5 or 6 noroviruses, and why wouldn't you, in knowing that a pandemic is in all likelihood coming, why wouldn't you take what you have, rip it apart, and rebuild it and see what happens? I mean, it seems like that would be the logical thing to do.
People study them. I mean, there's no doubt that people study them for all the reasons you said that, because again, it's sort of a matter of time when the next pandemic hits. But there's several levels at which it's just sort of, the whole thing's kind of ridiculous. First of all, this is a very bad idea for a weapon, right? Unless you have your people have a cure or something.
Right. That's what I say too. Is I guess it's there are so many more efficient ways to cause a global chaotic event than this.
Without hurting yourself. I mean, that's
right.
That's the efficiency. Yeah. No, and maybe then they go to, well, it got out by accident, but again, we know the sequence, and it is, first of all, there's not much motive to just make something like this as a weapon, and if you did, it would be very difficult to obscure that fact once people all over the world are sequencing it and looking exactly at it is, and they're comparing it to other viruses we already know. That's how they're trying to figure out where it came from.
Right.
So
I think that they point the finger at Bill Gates because of his. I get into lengthy conversations on Facebook about this with people that I love dearly, who, think that this is a big conspiracy with eugenics involved and all that. And I said, well, I mean, technically, there's a lot of people on the planet, and it wouldn't hurt us to maybe chill that out a little bit, But
that's what.
That gets people very freaked out very fast, So.
Well, yeah, no, it's not. People don't like it when you say, "Well, that's the beauty of a pandemic."
That's what I call the Thanos argument.
yeah, that's a nice. Yeah, I forgot about that. That's a nice reference but it and then truthfully, the flu does it every season.
Sure.
Right, not to this extent.
Sure. Well, not this rapidly.
Some economist somewhere has calculated how much money we save every year by culling the elderly herd with the flu, right? I mean, that's a pretty dark way of looking at it, obviously.
Absolutely.
But if you wanted to, that would be not hard to do, and I suspect somebody's done it and just hadn't published it.
And the poor as well, not just the elderly, but also the poor.
No, the whole thing, these things are, and we're kind of overdue we were overdue in a way.
We were, sure.
And again, this is not to celebrate this at all, trust me.
No, it's still terrible, but I think a lot of people knew that this was coming.
Yes, and a lot of, like so many things that aren't working very well, is there's just kind of too many of us on the planet.
Yeah, which is a shame because I think this planet has the resources to handle its, if you will, children, but economics steps in and says, well, let's tell the farmers to hold this grain in this silo, and let's have them slaughter these cows because we can't deliver them to this person. And then there's people starving, and so it's this gross imbalance that humanity is culpable for. We have not handled ourselves in a way that is symbiotic with the planet we occupy, and it's unfortunate. And because of that, I think we end up in these situations.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure we can. I mean, if everyone's spread out evenly across the planet, maybe there's a calculation that says we could do this, but that's not how we're distributed, and it never will be.
No, and there's parts of the planet that aren't habitable. I mean, it's just
right. And so, but even the logistics of growing enough food here and getting it over there, it's not a trivial. It's not trivial.
It's not. It's complicated.
I agree with you about it. But I think it boils down to this, I'm not sure we're sustainable, honestly.
I know. We are, and I've said this before, it's super depressing. I mean, not in our lifetime, but that we are in the next great extinction, of course. I mean...
Yeah, and I don't know about our extinction, but
people, humanity. I mean, humans, beings, another 10, 12, 15,000 years, maybe.
Culture. I think cultural extinction, it could be in a few decades, honestly.
Yeah, we've jumped the shark a few times, I think.
The species, though, I suspect we'll just get knocked back to the Stone Age. I mean, that's,
Yeah, isn't that an Einstein quote? How do you think World War III will be fought? And his response was, I don't know, but I know that World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Yeah, that's a good, and that captures a lot of what we need to worry about.
Yeah.
I was watching something on CNN the other night late, and it was an interview, and they were talking about, and honestly, this is one of these things where I understand why people are put off by this kind of interview, because they were a little bit giddy about how clean the air was and everything, and I appreciate it as well, but it's probably not the main thing you want to, anyway, but they went on with that, and they made it clear that given right now the situation with so much shutdown, so much less travel, the carbon emissions had gone down 6%. And they were like, again, kind of giddy about that. Whereas my response was, really only 6%? That's all we've done, given what we're doing right now in terms of sheltering in place all over the damn world. And then again, in the similar kind of giddy voice, there was, if we would just do this intentionally, we could be halfway to the goal of the 2015 Paris Accords. I'm going, halfway? If we did this on purpose? And so I kind of throw my hands, I go, okay, I'd like to have clean air and clean water. As the culture goes extinct, I would like clean air and clean water. The CO2 footprint, I don't see what we're going to do about it. If now hardly makes a dent, that's incredible to me.
I read that one of the major holes in the ozone has repaired itself. So
that was supposed to happen. That's good.
Yeah, so that's nice. Maybe more people will ride their bicycles and walk. Or you know what? I think this has made a lot of people realize, like, oh, I can work from home and be maybe even more productive than for those who are lucky enough. Jobs. Yeah. So maybe
I think that's right. There'll be changes that I think will be positive in that way.
Sure.
But we're not going to kill the planet.
No! Every time
we're suicide pact, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we are inconsequential to Her Majesty for sure. And if you doubt that in any way, look at a sidewalk of cement and see the grass growing up through it, and you will realize that the Earth gives two shits that we're here.
Yeah, no, she'll be fine.
She's abiding us currently, but she gives two shits, I think. All right, let's out of this, like.
I don't want to. I mean, you can just cut this out because I don't know any more about this than any.
No. I love the conversation of it, and I don't either. I don't, but it's really fun for me to talk about, honestly. Okay. So, and darn it, I've been holed up for a long time, a couple months now. So, let's talk about the music. So you retired from being a research scientist, and you said, hey, let's take this brain and stick some music around it. Is that, you were always into music though, correct? And you sort of set it aside?
I started playing, guitar when I was, 12, 13, and I've always sort of written songs. And then even all through high school, I had like everyone, I had a rock and roll band in high school.
Yeah.
And then through college, and then even in graduate school, I sang. There's a friend of mine, a woman, sang with me. He was regularly. There were some coffee shops in Cambridge that we would play at regularly, and we got relatively well known locally. It was fun because I was in grad school. I didn't spend the amount of time I do now, working on songs and doing stuff, but it was fun and satisfying to be recognized by other musicians and stuff. It was fun. So all the way up till I moved to San Francisco after graduate school, then I kind of stopped playing altogether. But before that, I'd played more or less constantly from when I was 12 or 13 to 23 or 24.
I'm so happy you decided to get back into it. Rumors of Reason is the record you put out in 2013.
Yes, I don't remember the date, but I should have done another one by now. But yeah, Rumors of Reason is the name of the CD.
Yeah.
And I was set to work on one now, but the sheltering, maybe I can do it. I really enjoy performing live. I never look forward to it. I end up going because I promised I would, but by the time it comes around, I'm questioning whether I should be playing at all. Why am I doing this? But then after the first song or two, then by the end, I'm just really kind of joyous that it was fun, and I think it serves to remind me. And see, this is how how broken I am. Because I make things up from scratch, and as you pointed out, some of them are odd, right? When a room full of people I don't know seem to get it, I'm just like reassured in a way that would be hard to do otherwise that we are the same species. And again, it's the social thing. I feel like, oh, thank you. I hoped you recognized that, but I was not. Right? I mean, I got songs about coming home to a weirdly naked blue woman in oil or being shot out of a cannon, but for the most part, people are just let's go. I'm going with you. Let's go.
Yeah, I call that communion.
I find that so nice.
Yeah, I call that the communion of music. It's
yes.
As a performer myself, that there's nothing like it, and I don't know that there's very many artists alive who don't get freaked out before they go on, and then somewhere John Prine is a great example, and then once he's on that stage, it's
he's so fluid up there.
Oh, so great.
He's one of the few I got to see when I was younger, and a couple of times, and his music is just wonderful, of course, but the way he was on stage, it was so authentic, and you just really walked away thinking you knew him, that he was genuinely that guy.
Yeah.
I suspect he was.
Yeah, I do too. And honestly, like I said before, watching you perform and hearing your songs, the Python-esque, Prine-esque, Cohen-esque mixture it was really, the best word I could come up with was delightful. It was just delightful. And that's lovely for the audience, that communion back from the audience back to you, it's that.
No, it does. It absolutely works that way. Communion is a good term for it, because it absolutely, and for some reason, I cannot keep it in my heart. I'm always, oh God, and then I've got to somehow remember this thing of, that it will be a communion, but for some reason, I lose it, but then it's a wonderful experience. It really is.
I suppose that it's that way every time, and so maybe that's the same thing with the people who give birth, that they forget what the torture it was to put the baby out. That we do these things and we love them, and we forget the fear, but the fear is part of the joyride.
Yeah, and so. But you get locked in. I mean, because and that's how I feel. Like often, I go because I don't want to be the guy who didn't show up when he's
right.
So maybe it's not exactly like having a baby, but the point is, I feel committed to follow through on this thing I've put in motion.
Yeah, I think people who are having babies probably feel that way too.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I'm committed.
Yeah, I gotta go the whole way from here.
Chauncey, how can people find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, mine Chauncey Bowers. I have a website, chaunceybowers.com.
Yes.
And my CD's on there. They can songs and see if they like them. They're available on all these digital places.
Sure, and I'll put links on heyhumanpodcast.com so that people can find you quite easily.
Okay, that'd be good. And then there's also songs live. There's videos on the website of me playing songs that are not on the CD live, because I have a lot of those now that I need to get. In fact, some of the songs that people like the most are not on CD because I have to do a live performance. Some of these songs, it's sort of like stand-up. Like, it's the communion, it's the feedback, right? And for funny songs, that has to be there. For other songs, you can just play in a studio. But
sounds like a good reason to do a live CD.
Yes. No, that is absolutely the reason that I need to get on it.
Yeah. Maybe a live CD recorded at Wine and Song.
Yeah, Brad and I kicked it around. So it's just I have not done it before, so I have this fear of all things I haven't done. So
Chauncey, what a lovely conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's really good to see you. Hopefully when we can leave the house, run into you.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we'll get to share a stage even and, perform together.
That'd be great.
That would be really fun.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening. Stay safe. Love you. Bye.